The world is buzzing with whispers of a deal so massive, it has the power to shake the very foundations of global politics. Imagine a small landlocked nation, long written off as powerless, suddenly striking an $18 billion gold agreement with India, one of the world's fastest-growing economies. This isn't just business. It's a direct challenge to centuries of Western dominance. And at the heart of it all stands Ibrahim Traoré, a young African leader defying every odd stacked against him. The question isn't just what this deal means for Burkina Faso, but how the West, so used to control, will react when the game is no longer in their hands. For decades, Burkina Faso's immense natural wealth, especially its gold, has been extracted and exported under the watchful eyes of foreign corporations, the profits rarely trickling down to the people who mine the dust with their bare hands. Instead, generations of Africans have been left with crumbling schools, weak infrastructure, and an endless cycle of poverty. The story has always been the same. Africa provides, others profit. But then came a new chapter, one that no one saw coming. At just 36 years old, Ibrahim Traoré went from being a soldier to the president of Burkina Faso, a country in West Africa. His rise to power was not your typical. It was messy, it was raw, and it was fueled by the frustration of a nation. He was the face of a new movement, a movement that was sick and tired of being controlled by Western powers, a movement that wanted to break free from the chains of neo-colonial control. When Traoré started speaking out against Western powers, exposing how Africa's resources were being looted and calling for a future where Africans were in control of their own destiny, he became a symbol of hope for millions. So when rumors began to spread of an $18 billion gold deal between Burkina Faso and India, the world took notice. Could this be true? Could a small African nation be striking a major deal with one of the fastest-growing economies in the world? For India, the deal symbolized energy, growth, and a chance to bypass Western chokeholds. For Burkina Faso, it meant sovereignty, jobs, and a chance to finally write its own story. And for the West, it spelled panic because if Africa could partner directly with giants like India, their centuries-old grip would begin to slip away. When the first reports of an $18 billion gold deal between Burkina Faso and India emerged, Western capitals were skeptical. How could a small African nation bypass the usual channels and strike a deal with one of the fastest-growing economies in the world? For many in Washington, London, and Paris, the answer was simple. This couldn't be real. But as the details emerged, skepticism turned to fear. India had agreed to purchase vast reserves of Burkinabe gold, not through the channels controlled by Western multinationals, but directly from the Burkinabe state. This meant billions in revenue flowing into Burkina Faso's coffers without passing through the old colonial hands. It meant new infrastructure projects, better schools, and the potential for a self-sustaining economy. But most importantly, it meant a symbolic shift, a break from dependence on Europe and America. The gold deal is a clear example of this new trend, a trend that has Western elites worried, a trend that is reshaping the global order. If you want to know more, stay tuned. For decades, the West had one simple truth about Africa. No matter how rich in resources, African nations could never organize themselves without outside guidance. They would always need Western help to manage their economies. So loans from the IMF and World Bank were structured to keep countries in debt and dependent. Oh, sure. They'd open up their economies to foreign corporations who would come in and plunder Africa's riches. Gold, diamonds, oil, it didn't matter. The story was always the same. The West would come in and take what they wanted, leaving nothing for the Africans. But then came Traoré, a fiery young leader who had a different vision. He wasn't going to let the West exploit Burkina Faso anymore. And he started with their most valuable resource, gold. He renegotiated the gold deal, making it clear that the profits would stay in Burkina Faso. And when the multinational corporation complained to the IMF, threatening to pull out of the country, Trudeau responded with a simple message: "We will not beg for crumbs when our soil is rich with treasure." His words electrified the nation. People took to the streets in protest against the IMF, and soon his name was being chanted from Mali to Niger. He had become a symbol of defiance against the West, a leader who dared to dream of an Africa free from Western control. In the West, alarm bells were ringing. Analysts were warning of a geopolitical earthquake. If Burkina Faso succeeds, one European diplomat confessed, others will follow. The domino effect could cripple our influence in Africa. Already whispers circulated of Niger seeking similar deals, and rumors spread that even larger economies like Nigeria were watching closely. But power never shifts quietly. Reports began to surface of economic sabotage, diplomatic pressure, and covert attempts to destabilize Traore's government. Western media painted him as a dictator and a strongman, echoing the same labels used against leaders who challenged global hierarchies. But on the ground, ordinary Africans saw something else. A young leader daring to play a game that was always rigged against them. For India, the deal was equally strategic, by investing heavily in Burkina Faso's gold, New Delhi was signaling its intent to carve out a new role for itself in the global south, one that bypassed Western approval. It wasn't just about economics. It was about reshaping alliances, building trust, and rewriting the rules of global trade. As momentum grew, so did the stakes. Would Traoré withstand the pressure of the world's most powerful nations? Could Burkina Faso resist the storm of sanctions, propaganda, and covert operations likely heading its way? Or would this $18 billion deal ignite a fire across Africa too big for the West to contain? The stage was set. What began as whispers of a gold agreement had now escalated into a high-stakes battle over the future of an entire continent. And the world watched, holding its breath, as Ibrahim Traoré prepared for the fight of his life. The announcement came like thunder. In a packed hall draped with the colors of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré officially signed the $18 billion gold agreement with India. Cameras flashed, cheers erupted, and in that moment, history was written. A handshake between the Burkinabe leader and India's trade minister symbolized more than a contract. It was a declaration of independence from centuries of control. But while the room celebrated far away in Western capitals, silence turned to outrage. When news broke that Burkina Faso had struck a deal with Russia, every news outlet immediately branded it as reckless, unsustainable, and a threat to international stability. The same voices that once ignored Burkina Faso now flooded television screens, warning of geopolitical instability and predicting disaster. Yet underneath the rhetoric, there was one clear truth. The West was terrified. Pressure mounted quickly. International banks began reviewing Burkina Faso's access to credit. Western ambassadors issued veiled threats about regional security, and anonymous leaks suggested that military intervention could not be ruled out. The full weight of the old system moved against a nation that dared to dream freely. And yet inside Burkina Faso, the atmosphere was electric. For the first time in living memory, ordinary citizens felt that their sacrifice might finally pay off. The miners who once worked for pennies believed that their children might attend proper schools. Farmers who toiled dry soil imagined roads and irrigation funded by their own nation's gold. Across Africa, leaders watched closely, some quietly reaching out to Toro while others grew bolder, demanding fairer deals of their own. The world was watching. Would Traoré bend under the crushing weight of global powers, or would he stand firm? His supporters hailed him as a modern-day revolutionary, while his opponents painted him as reckless, gambling with the future of his people. But one fact was undeniable. The West's monopoly on African resources had been broken. For Traoré, the gold deal was never just about money. It was about dignity. It was about showing that even a small landlocked nation could challenge giants, could rewrite history and inspire a continent. And in that climactic moment, as the ink dried on the agreement, one thing became clear. The rules of the game had changed forever. The ink on the $18 billion gold deal was barely dry when ripple effects began spreading across the globe. In Africa, leaders who once remained silent started questioning why their nations continued to bow to outdated agreements. The dominoes were trembling and the first had already fallen. But resistance was fierce. Western financial institutions tightened their grip, issuing warnings and quietly funding opposition voices within Burkina Faso. Reports of covert destabilization surfaced, from orchestrated protests to sudden spikes in hostile media coverage. Yet despite the storm, Trudeau's government projected calm, standing firm on the principle that Africans must own their resources and chart their own destinies. For India, the deal was more than a triumph of trade. It was a symbolic leap into a new world order. Bypassing Western approval and aligning directly with Africa, India positioned itself as a leader in the global South, a voice for multipolarity in a world long dominated by a handful of powers. The partnership wasn't just economic, it was philosophical. Two nations, big and small, declared that sovereignty mattered more than dependency. The West, meanwhile, faced an uncomfortable reality. For centuries, its dominance had relied on Africa remaining a silent supplier of wealth. But silence was breaking. A young leader from a small country had cracked the foundation of a global system, and the world was now watching to see whether it would collapse or adapt. For ordinary Africans, the impact was personal. The possibility of new schools, better health care, modern roads, and fair wages no longer felt like a distant dream, but an achievable goal. For the first time in generations, hope was tangible, and so the story of Traore's $18 billion gold deal is never just about gold. It's about courage. It's about defiance. It's about the possibility that one bold step can ignite a fire across a continent. A little over a century ago, Africa was on its knees. The Berlin Conference had just ended, carving up the continent among European powers. But one thing they didn't count on was the resourcefulness of the African people. Fast forward to today. Africa is home to some of the fastest-growing economies in the world, boasting a combined GDP growth rate of 7%. That's twice the global average. And by 2050, Africa will be home to 2.5 billion people, making it the most populated continent on Earth. So if Africa begins to rise on its own terms, how will the world change? And more importantly, who will try to stop it? The answer is China. And that's why they're building a high-speed rail in Africa, not just for trade, but to control the narrative and keep Africa in their debt. If you want to know more about China's plan to dominate Africa, stay tuned for more updates. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because the world needs to hear stories like this one.